Thank you, Tom. Good morning. Get my water down here. I apologize ahead of time. I've got a little bit of a cold here, getting over the cold, but we'll try to get through this as quickly and as painlessly as possible. As Tom alluded to, several phone calls a year come into the office, and maybe you've made some phone calls in the past, or you've had to answer these questions in the 19th hole, or why the golf course rating is the way it is, and how it affects, and what are some of the things. So I thought about it for a while, and I got to talking with some of the other folks who do the same thing that I do at other state and regional associations in the country. And Martha Kerouac, who is now the executive director of the Georgia State Golf Association and a Rhode Island native, was nice enough to pass along and help me along with this years ago in this program. So this is the start of it, and I think it'll open up some eyes for you as we move forward. So we always wonder what's the role of superintendent and how it's going to affect. So basically, there's two things that we look for, and this is on the male side of things, so I'm going to do the definition of a male golfer. Scratch male golfer is a player who can play a course handicap of 0 on any and all rated golf courses. And a bogey golfer is a player who has a course handicap of approximately 20 and on a golf course of standard difficulty. Now, that standard difficulty is a golf course that's sloped at 113. Now, big kind of question that everybody always has is they all want to focus on the slope number, the number that has the 113. And believe it or not, the most important number in course rating is the one with the decimal point. It's actually the first number. It's the 72.4. And then what you don't see is the bogey rating, which sits behind the scenes. And when you connect the scratch rating with the bogey rating, that gives us a slope line. And you'll see that as we move on a little bit. Now, male scratch golfer hits the tee shot 250 yards off the tee. So we evaluate his landing zone. We do the same thing with a bogey rating at 200 yards. So the scratch male golfer would hit 250 off the tee, and the bogey male golfer will be in 200. So he's 50 yards behind, and this works our way right down the fairway. So we're going to evaluate all these 10 obstacles that we're going to talk about. But here's a little background on the rating. It was established in '87 when slope was actually introduced, because it used to be USGA guys that would ride around and kind of guesstimate what the par should be at a golf course. Never get out of the golf cart, never look at the depth of the bunkers, never look at the turf quality. All those things were never really calculated until '87. So we really stepped up the program. So as you can see in the red text, simply stated, the course rating is a target score for a scratch golfer that we think they will obtain 25% of the time. So it's 75% of the time they're never going to close to that course rating. So picture the best player at your club. Look at those back tees that he plays all the time, or she plays in the women's case. If she's playing the white tees or the red tees, look at that target score and then go look at their score history. You'll find maybe 3 or 4 scores in there that are close to that target score, the course rating, but then you won't find anything down the road. They'll be a little higher than that down the line. So the bogey rating hides behind the scenes, as I mentioned earlier. So if I give you an example of a blue tee, we've got the course rating and the scratch rating of 72.4, and it might be a 92.4. And when you connect those two, it's a rise over run number. It's a simple math equation. So if I raise the bogey rating even higher, what happens to my slope? It starts to go up, and I get a higher slope number. So you can see how the 133, 134 really is not that important at the end of things. Bogey rating is a target score. We include the bogey rating on every set of tees now when we rate a golf course. So if we come out to your golf facility this year, you will see the correspondence that I will send. We'll have a scratch rating, a bogey rating, and the slope rating, as well as all the information on the tees. So here's a great picture of the 17th hole at Glens Falls Country Club up in Queensbury, New York. And we happen to have Dr. Bob Foley here in the second row, who is Green's chairman at the club. And I actually have been playing out here since I was in college. Good college friend of mine is a member here. And this is a Donald Ross gem. This is hidden gem that if you ever get the opportunity to get up to Saratoga, or if you go to the tracks, make a trip up to Queensbury. It's worth the trip. Chris Freelyhofer is the superintendent there and does a great job. But what I wanted to point out here is you can see the blue arrow. That's the scratch. That's where the scratch golfer is going to tee off on the back tee. His landing zone is going to be on the top plateau near the tree. The bogey golfer, the bogey golfer is going to hit to the plateau because he only hits a 200 off the tee. The scratch golfer is going to be down in the valley with his driver. So you could see that the hole just changes drastically from one golfer to the other, and that's the point of this. Down in the hole, the scratch golfer might have a wedge in his hand, but he can't see the green surface at all, and he can barely see the top of that flagstick. So those are things that we look for when we rate the golf course. So design has a lot to do with it. Look at the pinching in of the fairways there. It gets very narrow for that scratch golfer, but it's a very generous landing zone for the bogey golfer. So what are the 10 obstacle values that we look for on every hole? And there are 10, along with some other stuff. We look for roll, we factor that all in. But there's basically 10 obstacle values that we look for, and here's what they are. Topography, fairway, green target, rough and recovery, bunkers, out of bounds extreme rough, water hazard, trees, green surface, and then the last one is psychological, which is an equation that's automatically built into the program that states that any values over 5 or greater, we add up the total there, and they have to reach 20. So there's some math involved in that one. So what's the first thing we look for? Topography is simply the evaluation of terrain on play. Here's the first hole at Eastwood Ho, and you can see it's got quite a bit of change in elevation there. Frank Hancock, superintendent there, took over for Brian Cowan, I want to say about 10 years ago. So the next piece of the puzzle is fairway, and we start at the beginning of the tee when we rate, and we work our way right down the fairway. So the first thing that I'm going to look at is the landing zone of the topography and what kind of a shot I have. Is it tilted? Is it up? Is it down? Is the ball going to stay in one place? Am I going to have an awkward lie? Same thing with the fairway. I'm going to look at the fairway widths and make sure that they're 30 to 40 yards wide. If they are, then I've got some movement there. Here's Cape Cod National. And so we're evaluating all the fairways from tee to green. Green target is the evaluation and of the difficulty of hitting the green with the approach shot. So here's a downhill par 4 where you've got a couple of ledges here that you can see in the picture. So you're going to have some fairly flat ledges, maybe a little bit of a tilt, but you could see the green target down the hill, so you could see. And the green target number is based on how big the green is. So ahead of time we know how big that green surface is, so that obviously the larger the green target, the easier to hit. The less club I have in, the less spray I'm going to have. If I've got a 3-iron in my hand coming in from 210 yards, then the shot pattern is going to go left, right. All those things are factored in when we do this. Recoverability in rough. That's the evaluation of the rough height around the greens and throughout the golf course. Because you can see here, this is the this is 5 at Eastwood Ho again from a slightly different angle. But you can see here they've got some native fescue, they got some carry to get to the fairway, and you've got the fescue that's been over on the right-hand side and the left-hand side. Here we've got bunkers. When we look at bunkers, we're looking at where they are in location to the landing zones and how much, what their size are in proximity around the putting greens. Here's the 4th green at the Country Club, which hosted the amateur last summer. And so you can see there's some depth involved here. So we'll get into all these bunkers, and the raters will actually climb into the bunkers and they'll measure the depth of the bunkers, and we look at our charts and it tells us exactly what numbers we're going to go into. Here's Myopia Hunt Club, OB and Extreme Rough. It's based upon the location, severity, and the jeopardy, basically, of where this rough is situated. This is actually looking back on the, I believe this is 7th and 8th fairways to our left, and I kind of shot this during the amateur a few years ago. It was a pristine day there at Hamilton. Water hazards, obviously TPC sawgrass here. We've got the evaluation and lateral of these lateral and crossing hazards and the shot length to successfully carry them. USGA says that we have to add 10 yards to all of our yardage. So if I've got my Bushnells out there and I see that water hazard stake and it says 130 yards, I'm going to add another 10 yards onto that to successfully get over that crossing water hazard. So in essence, that water hazard becomes 150 yard as opposed to 140 yards for the rating purposes. Those are some of the things that our raters are all trained to do. There's also a surround. Anytime you've got an island green like that, your water values are going to come straight up because there's nothing. If you miss that green, where is it? It's swimming. So those are all the things that we look for. And trees are based on the size and the density. Here's a golf course in upstate New York that I called off the web, and you could see if you hit it into those trees, you're probably pretty much just coming out laterally. I mean, there's not a whole lot of advancement in this one. So if there's a tree removal program, I'm all for it, because it's really hard to grow grass in a closet sometimes, but I don't have to tell you that. Green surfaces are the evaluation. This is Sleepy Hollow on the Hudson down in New York. The evaluation of the difficulty from a putting standpoint. So we look for basically, we take into account the speed of the greens, the firmness of them, and we'll get into that in a second. And we also talk about any undulations, highly or steeply contoured, and then there's relatively flat, and then there's the middle of the road. There's moderately contoured. So those are the three that we look for. So there's some subjectivity involved here, but hopefully the rating teams that come out to visit you are quite trained, and we try to do a pretty good job. We train up all of our raters here in Massachusetts individually. I meet with every single team in the spring and kind of get the juices flowing for them. So here is the first green at Essex County Club, and the red line highlights the tilt in the green surface. So that's part of the things we do. Going back to kind of what Paul was talking about with his regrassing and changing the tilt of that fifth green at his place, what we're seeing here is the same type of thing where if a golf course superintendent is doing some heavy watering here, the holding properties are going to be okay there. But if he's firm and fast, like this probably was for the Curtis Cup a few years ago, then what's going to happen is you're going to have a very, you don't want to be long here, and it's going to be, so all those things are factors that we look for. So the most importantly is how does the superintendent fit into this? Where does the superintendent on a golf course do this? So here's some fun little nuggets. If the effective playing length is changed 25 yards, it will result in an adjustment of 0.1 on the course rating. That really doesn't mean much to you because we're talking about tenths of points. So 72.8 to 72.7 if you move up 25 yards on one set of tees. So what we recommend when a golf course is set up, not to save the tees on the back for the weekends. This is the old adage, well, I'm going to save it for the big boys on the weekend. We're going to move the tees, all the markers up to the front of the teeing grounds and try to save the back of the tees for the weekend play. I've heard that over the years. What we recommend at the USGA and at the MGA is that you get a nice balance. So if you move 4 or 5 up, make sure you get 4 or 5 of them back into that zone so you've got a nice balance and you're staying around your 6,400 yards or your 6,300 yard golf course, which is what you're rated for. Little secret, a golf course which shall remain nameless, first opened about 20 years ago, well, 16 years ago. It was one of my first years at the MGA. And I went down and I measured the golf course. And the architect had told the new owner that he was going to build him a 7,000 yard golf course. He was going to have that slope from the back tees at 135. He knew it, he knew it, he knew it. And when we had our team come out there, the slope came out to 127 or 128 from the back tees. Now granted, the course rating was high, but the bogey rating was just as high as well. So there was not a big delineation between the two ratings. When you've got a bigger number, that's when your slope starts to go up. When the course rating is low, let's say it's 68.0 down here, and it's a 98.0, you're going to connect those two lines. The farther those two numbers are away from each other, the higher your slope. Make sense? I see some light bulbs going off here above everybody's head. That's how it works. So if I increase the bogey rating up, I'm getting farther away from that scratch rating, and the same is the back way. If I get them closer together, that's all slope is. Slope is not the most important number. So the guy who was building the golf course was not too happy when I came back with the numbers that said your back tees are sloped at 128, and that's what he looked at. And so I explained to him, I said, your course rating is 73.8, and the par was only 71. And he went, what does that mean? So I had to walk through that, this is the target score that we talk about that we're going to attain 25% of the time. So those are the things that we look for. You saw that change of 95 yards would adjust the slope rating 1 point. So it's not a whole lot. Sometimes when you look at a golf course that's sloped at 133 and you're an 8.7 handicap index and you say 133, I'm going to be a 10 on this golf course. Then you go back to your golf course back home and you slope at 128 and you look at it at 8.3, I'm still a 10. So sometimes there's not a whole lot of change for those really good players. You'll see a change in the course handicap from the bogey players and the higher players, golfers that don't have that ability. Tee marker placement, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that you increase and decrease and kind of balance that out as you set your golf course up every day. That's the most important. So consider the effect of moving everything up 10 yards or moving everything back. We're talking 180 yards over the course of an 18-hole round. What's it going to do to our course rating? It's going to go up or down 0.8, and it's going to change the slope at least 2. things to think about. So what you don't want to hurt your members, because then they call me and tell me I don't know what I'm doing at the MGA, and I don't want to don't want to go down that road. Here's a perfect example of saving the tee for the weekend type of thing. Oh, let's save the tee for the back tees for the big fellas this weekend. Understandable if you've got a big event coming up, but just a visual here to do this. So let's talk about some irrigation practices. As I look at Pat Daly, who likes to water heavily or soften and firm up areas. So if you're looking at some of the softening of the fairway landing zones, you might increase the effective playing length, while overly firm landing zones will shorten. It's just all about the roll. So if I go 250 out there and I keep the sprinklers going all night long, am I going to get that roll from off the tee? It's probably going to hit and stop. I'm not going to get that extra 25 yards of roll, because the USGA says I hit a 225 in the air and I'm going to roll it out another 20, 25 yards. So that's where I get my magical 250 off the tee. Think about that. Now, before everybody goes, wait a minute, I've seen these guys bomb at 300. Yes, the flat bellies, the skinny guys, all the college kids, they hit it a ton. The USGA, we've gone back and forth from the handicap department and the course rating department and said to the research and development guys, listen, let's get those iron Byrons out there and let's see how far we're really hitting these things. And I think it's such a huge undertaking if they change that landing zone from 250 to 275 or 280. It's just going to change everything, and it's actually going to bring your course ratings down a little bit, which will bring up your course handicaps. And we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll really baffle you. All right, so here we got some heavy saturated. We've got some watering going on here on the edge of the green. Mandatory, obviously, you just don't want to lose any of your greens in the hot summer. But if you do some heavy watering, you're going to have sticking properties from a shot coming in. It's going to hold the greens a little bit different. How about altering the rough heights? Changing the rough height by about 1 inch on all 18s across the golf course. We'll change the course rating by 0.7 and the slope rating by 5 under the R&R. So there's some, how often, most guys I think set at 2.5 inches here in the Northeast is a pretty safe deal. What we've started to see too are collection areas around the greens where we're recapturing some of the contour and the fall off zones thanks to the Donald Ross designs. And what clubs are doing is they're trying to bring that stuff back. And there's actually part of our process where we'll pick up on that as raters. We're trained to go, okay, we've got some inconsistencies with this rough, and that's going to help us down the road. So we'll get the right numbers. We're not just going to be set in our ways about, oh, it's 2.5 inches, boom. So establishing the areas of native fescues, which is another popular thing to do because it cuts down on maintenance costs. We've got native fescues, lining the sides of the fairways. Those things, because it brings maintenance down, you're not busy cutting and mowing all this time. Those are factors where if I hit a ball into that area and if it's in my landing zone or along my line of play for a bogey golfer, I'm going to have some issues with that because I could very well lose a golf ball in there. You can see some of the rough height here stick. We all like to get that rough height up during the 3-day member guest. Punish those member guest players. How about the green targets? If we change the holding properties, going back to that gentleman who was watering the greens, if he does some heavy watering of the greens, you're going to change the rating up to 0.2 on the course rating, and the slope can change up to a point just by changing your water properties on the green. Additionally, if you recapture expanding lost green surfaces, which happens, green creep is a phenomenon that we know. Picture the weekend kid who works for you, you superintendents in the room. And, of course, the last thing he wants to do after a fun night Friday night is get in there early. He's a little late, so the boss is mad at him. But he doesn't want to scalp those collars, so what's he do? He just creeps it in a little bit because the scalping would scare him. Now, you ask most superintendents in the room, they'll say, yeah, scalp away, we don't care, as long as it's not too ugly. But maintain that nice border around the green. But what happens is the green, by the end of the summer, will lose, and the collar will get wider and wider because the green has shrunk. And it does happen quite a bit. There's been quite a few studies on the green creep. And tee creep, it happens on any kind of mowing patterns. So if you increase the green speed, how about we change the stimp meter on 18 holes 1 to 2 feet? Look at the change there, 1 to 0.4 and 2 on the slope. How many people love their stimp meter? All the superintendents in the room, raise your hand. How many love your stimp? Yeah, I thought so. No offense, Mr. Stimpson. Flat greens are obviously easier to judge with the speed than they are for undulating greens. Bogey golfers have a hard time with undulating greens. So picture the newer golf courses that we see, these resorty type of golf courses you go to, where you've got all this great movement in the greens. What we were really doing is you're looking at your hole location space, and you might have an upper left, lower right. You might have some. Here's a perfect example. You've got one on the left where it is. You've got one over down to the right, maybe one on the, and I don't think you can use the front of that green. It doesn't look like you'd have a whole lot of room. So I can imagine that by the end of the summer, you're looking at some pretty old hole plugs here based on this stuff. I would love for the architects in the room, Mr. Garish, to once attend a course rating seminar to see what we look for as course raters, to see what goes into the process. And I do know that Reese Jones has attended some course rating calibration seminars, and I'm on my way to one next weekend, so we'll be busy with this. Here's another example of increasing your speeds, whether you roll or not, after you cut. If you're a roller of the greens, that would be another opportunity for you to take care of. So you can see as a superintendent how you can really change the ratings, and you can adjust this. What we recommend, again, is that you try to keep it even balanced. So now you have an understanding of what's going to happen if you overwater, underwater, if you change the properties, if you pinch in landing zones, how it's going to affect your course ratings. Here's Worcester Country Club, and it's an example. Here's your rise over run. So basically, as I was saying earlier, you've got your scratch rating target of 72.7 that we spit out. That's what the program picks out. We find that bogey, that stuff for the scratch golfer. Then we're going to come over here to the bogey golfer, and we're going to find his target score of 97.3. And when you put it on that line there, it comes out at 133 on the slope. So the next time, here's a great bar bet for you guys in the 19th hole. The next time somebody says, which golf course is harder, write down a 68.2 133 and a 72.7 133, and let's see what they say. They'll say, well, they're both equal because they're both at 333 on the slope. That just means they're running parallel to each other. This is still an easier golf course because the bogey rating is only 91 point something, and it's 68 point here. Make sense to everybody now? That's what slope is. So you can have two golf courses with the exact same slope, and obviously the one with the decimal point is the one that's more difficult. Some other factors that we look for, obviously change in elevation off the tees, teeing ground and the surfaces there. Forced layup or dog legs. We know that a bogey golfer hits at 200 yards. So if the neck of the dog leg turns, and that turns at 210, what's he doing? He's hitting at 175 and he's getting that 25 rollout. Is he going to be able to get around that corner with those trees? Sometimes it's a dog leg where it forces him now to hit a 9-iron to get into the corner of the dog leg, so then he can hit his 3-iron or 3-wood home. Some of those factors, when the tees are way back and you've got that kind of shoot mentality, that's how that works. Prevailing winds. We have a lot of golf courses on the Cape that this factors in quite a bit with our Cape Cod golf courses. For anything downwind, and this is an average of 10 to 12, but we can use higher speeds if we have to. So I would say 10 to 12 is the Eastward Hose, the Catancettes, the Hyannis Ports of the world, anywhere that's kind of exposed and have a whole lot of trees. You get out into the Berkshires, I think you've got some of the trees that will happen. So we've got best of both worlds out here. We can go out to the western part of the state in Massachusetts, or we can go down to the Cape and have two completely different. The island courses, Sankaty, that's probably closer to 16 miles an hour sustained winds. So we factor in the winds on that. Some additional resources before I let you go. Dean Knuth's webpage. Dean Knuth was a member of the USGA staff, and he was the senior director of handicapping and course rating. He's really the one that spearheaded and came up with slope and how it works. So, of course, he's got a webpage called The Pope of Slope. And a great resource, believe it or not, very good resource right there, popeofslope.com. And you will find a lot of interesting pictures and a lot of great articles there. So I encourage you, if you've got your smartphone, take a quick picture there. You can always do USGA, MGA, or you're welcome to email me personally with any questions. And I hope to get back to you as soon as possible on that. So with that, I say thank you, and I will open up the floor to any questions. I think I have about